Over the 20 years of World of Warcraft's lifetime, over 1,000 mounts have been added to the game for players to collect, but some of them stand above the rest, either for their recognizability, infamy, or popularity amongst players. I've compiled a list of 10 of the most unique mounts I believe stand out amongst the others, and look especially different in comparison to most other mounts. The mounts in this video are chosen because of their particularly unique models that cannot be obtained elsewhere, unlike some mounts which have multiple recolors that have been obtainable throughout the years. Some of these mounts are my favorite mounts in the game, so of course everything on this list is my opinion. No mounts that are obtained from sources other than activities done in-game will appear, which really narrows down the options since store mounts seem to get the special treatment and are usually much more unique than the mounts obtainable in-game. With that being said, let's move on to the first entry. To start off, let's take a look at the mount Stallion, rewarded from the Underbelly Tycoon achievement introduced in the Legion expansion. To get this mount, the player must gather 20,000 sightless eyes from various activities in the Underbelly, the sewers below Legion Dalaran. These activities can include PvP, treasures, rares, and fishing, and there are plenty of guides on how to farm this in about 2 to 3 hours if your server is empty, but if it isn't, the PvP can make this mount grind quite tedious. When this mountain was initially added to the game and the sewers were full of people, it could take weeks of hanging out in the sewers to try and obtain all the needed sightless eyes since the area was highly contested. Luckily, it is significantly easier to get now, making such a cool mount more accessible to all kinds of players. This mount is both thematically perfect for the method of obtaining it, as well as being the only rat mount in the game, in addition to only sharing a skeleton with the Squeaker's store mount, as well as the Sarge's tail mount from the Hearthstone anniversary event. Since this mount can easily be obtained within a few hours, it is definitely worth the effort involved in obtaining it, and every player should try to get their hands on one. Next up is the Darkmoon dirigible, a reward purchasable from the Darkmoon Fair monthly event for 1,000 Darkmoon prize tokens. This mount is a Darkmoon themed zeppelin similar to those utilized by Horde players when they cross between continents. The 1,000 Darkmoon tickets may seem like a large hassle, and it is a grind, but it's not as bad as it seems. Every month when the Darkmoon Fair comes around for the week, you can obtain up to 278 tickets per month from dailies, monthlies, and profession quests. In addition, you could do the Silas's Secret Stash quest from the Faded Treasure Map bought for 100 Darkmoon dagger mauls from the fishing vendor, which will eventually give you 100 Darkmoon prize tickets one time only. The thing is that you can get all of this in 1 week per character, but Blizzard in the War Within decided to make the prize tickets war-bound. So if you really wanted to grind out the mount, you could just do everything on 3 separate characters in 1 week. Then boom, the mount is yours, where prior you would have to farm for 4 consecutive months to obtain this mount, which was quite a hassle. This mount single-handedly brought people back to the Darkmoon Fair at the time of its release, and made it relevant again, which is definitely warranted for this mount's awesome design. Following, we have the mounts that come from the expansion meta achievements for most of the content in those expansions. First is Tyvon from the World Awoken achievement for the Dragonflight expansion. Next is Zoval's Soul Eater from the achievement Back from the Beyond for Shadowlands. And lastly, Johnny's Trash Pile from the A Farewell to Arms achievement for the Battle for Azeroth expansion. These were recently added as a sort of incentive for overworld content, as well as a unique reward for players who focus on the more casual parts of the game, because before they started adding these in Dragonflight, most of the mounts obtained from casual open world content didn't stand out above any other mounts. Raiding has the Mythic and Glory mounts, Mythic Plus has the Keystone Master mounts, and PvP has the Vicious and Gladiator mounts, and all of these generally have unique features and looks unobtainable anywhere else. These achievements serve as the end game to work towards for casual open world players, and even if the mounts require a ton of work over the course of the expansion, they are usually worth it and look awesome in comparison to many other mounts. As a reflection of the expansions they come from, these mounts are heavily thematic and specific, with Johnny being a Loa of the Zandalari Trolls, Zoval being the name of the jailer, and the Soul Eater's beast in his army, and Tyvon being a dog seen in the player's adventures through the Onaran Plains with a centaur, and him being a fan favorite. Obtaining these mounts is no easy task and requires a complete sweep through the content of prior expansions. In addition, it is likely they are going to keep adding these in retroactively, so eventually there will be one for almost every expansion, with Legion likely being next on the horizon. Adding these to the game will keep players and mount collectors engaged with older content and breathe life back into those old zones which are often dead and empty. Next up is the Soaring spelltome, rewarded from the Time Walking A Tour of Towers achievement, which requires the player to beat all of the Legion Mage Tower challenges during Legion Time Walking. These challenges scale down the player to be equal to the content and are quite difficult, requiring you to use everything at your class's disposal to be able to take them down, even sometimes requiring the use of old gear, gems, and trinkets that scale better with the content to get any obtainable edge on the bosses. There are 7 bosses to defeat, including Archmage Xylem, Agatha, Sigrun, Tugar Blood Totem, Riced Mage Spear, High Lord Cruel, and Lord Edris Thorn, with certain specializations for each class assigned to certain bosses, with some being designed for melee or ranged DPS, tanks, or healers. The Soaring spelltome mount itself is the only book mount in the game and looks like a Dalaran spellbook, with lots of detail both on the pages and the covers of the book. This mount is perfect for any mage or spellcaster transmogs and is totally worth the fun challenge that awaits. Also, a fun bonus for obtaining this mount is that when you clear the tower with a specific class, you will get a recolor of that class's tier 20 set from the Tomb of Sargeras raid, which for most classes are pretty cool. Following is the Bloodfang Widow, a large spider mount that resembles a Black Widow and is bought from the Mad Merchant in Legion Dalaran for 2 million gold. This mount is one of the first large gold sync mounts added to the game, similar to that of the original Caravan Brutosaur added in BFA. To justify the price, this mount is quite unique, being the only unarmored Black Widow spider, and to this day is probably the coolest spider mount they have added to the game. The Bloodfang Widow only shares a model with the heavily armored Vicious War Spider from PvP, but still looks very different despite their similarities. When obtaining this mount, not only do you need 2 million gold, but you also need to find the Mad Merchant Vendor, who is a sort of rare spawn NPC that will appear for 1 to 2 hours with a respawn timer anywhere between 4 hours to several days inside the Wonderworks toy shop in Dalaran. Not only is the mount expensive, but also quite annoying to find and obtain. If the merchant happens to spawn while you are asleep, and then takes several more days to spawn, you will be waiting a long time with no notion of how much longer you might be waiting. Next is the Fossilized Raptor, obtained from fossil archaeology dig sites added in the Cataclysm expansion. This mount shares the animations and skeletons of other raptor mounts, but contrasts by being a literal skeleton, which is a trait only shared by the undead racial mounts and the Wrath Frostworm mounts. Contrasting those though, this mount is decently high resolution and has a much more archaic Jurassic Park vibe to it, which definitely makes it stand out in a crowd. Like I said, to obtain this mount you must do fossil archaeology dig sites, which are quite tedious, especially because they are Cataclysm archaeology, which are distributed across most of the zones in Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms, and require you to do dig sites across the continents until one pops in an area for fossil digs. And even if one appears that you need, the odds of you getting very many fragments to even get close to seeing the raptor is unlikely. Fortunately, Blizzard added a better way to do old digs in Mist of Pandaria, which requires you to get 600 archaeology, which is still quite long, but can be done anywhere. And as you do digs, you will obtain restored artifacts, which can be turned into Bran Bronzebeard and Veil of Eternal Blossoms for specifically the fossil fragments or any other archaeology fragments for that matter. This method is much faster when trying to farm any specific archaeology items, and there are plenty of guides on YouTube on how to do it effectively. And the 7th mount on our list, or should I say group of mounts, is the seasonal gladiator mounts obtained by reaching the highest rating bracket of 2400 in rated 3v3 PvP arenas and winning 50 games. These mounts are themed by expansion and are usually some sort of higher resolution or armored version of other kinds of mounts in the game. These mounts have been awarded to players every expansion since the Burning Crusade, and there are a total of 39 in the game so far. There are 4 Nether Drakes, 4 Frostworms, 3 Twilight Drakes, 4 Cloud Serpents, 3 Gronlings, 7 Storm Dragons, 4 Proto Drakes, 4 Soul Eaters, 2 Dragonflight Drakes and Slither Drakes, and 2 Bats, each corresponding to the specific expansions in their release order. Some of these stand out more than others, and my particular favorites are the BFA Proto Drakes, since these are the only newer high resolution Proto Drake mounts while having really sick armor. The Soul Eaters due to their awesome model and theming, and the new War Within Bats because of their awesome animations and armor, which the other two bat mounts in the game don't have. Some of these mounts are particularly weaker than others though, namely the Mista Pandaria Cloud Serpent, which as far as the many Cloud Serpent mounts go are not that interesting. The 8th mount on the list is going to be the Jigglesworth Senior mount, obtainable during the end of expansion Fated seasons, which at first required the Fate of the Shadowlands raid achievement in Shadowlands, but then changed to the 3 of the Fated currency for the Dragonflight expansion. This mount is a Shadowlands Maldraxxus themed slime cat mount that is based off the cat Mr. Bigglesworth, who is previously a cat owned by Kel'Thuzad that can be seen in the Naxxramas raid, who was later turned into Mr. Jigglesworth in the Shadowlands. As far as cat mounts go, Jigglesworth Senior is a very unique and super high quality mount that has a model shared with no others. Hopefully, in future expansions and Fated seasons, they intend on adding more unique thematic mounts to the game like this one, though they didn't add a Fated mount for the Dragonflight expansion, so the odds are not in our favor. Then onto the next mount is the new Big G mount that drops from Mythic Gallywix in the new Liberation of the Undermine raid at a 100% drop rate for the rest of the War Within expansion, and after it will drop to around 1% in later expansions. I think this mount really stands out for how both perfect it fits thematically for Gallywix, that he is so self-absorbed that he would have a giant flying mech of his own head, and how much better this mount is at achieving a completely different look for a flying mech mount, when it has already been utilized so much previously. Most mechanical mounts in the game have been mechanical animals, walking mech suits, and a few flying heads here or there. The few flying heads there are though look nothing like this mount, which has substantially more detail, higher graphical quality, and looks significantly different than the other flying mechanical heads. I think this is one of the best mythic mounts they have added in recent expansions, and hopefully they continue to innovate more and more in the future. And lastly for this list is probably one of the mounts that has aged the best during its lifespan in the game, and that is the Antoran Gloomhound and Charhound, which can be obtained from the Glory of the Antoran Raider and the Fellhounds of Sargeras Boss respectively. These are super unique demon mounts added in the Legion expansion and have not been replicated since their introduction. They share the same skeletons of many other mounts in the game, like the giant bats and Venthyr gargoyles, that have different animations and completely different models. For mounts added almost 9 years ago, these still look just as good as some mounts added in current patches and are definitely some of the coolest raid mounts ever added to the game. Additionally, the Charhound is quite easy to farm since it drops from the second boss of the raid on all difficulties, so you can easily park a character there. You get 3 runs done every week in about 5 minutes. And those were 10 of what I thought were some of the most unique mounts in World of Warcraft. If there were any you think deserve to be on this list, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more. Anyways, I'm out.